What do you do when your ex texts, "I need to talk, today," and the fastest way to make her panic is one sentence that drags her own sister into the spotlight, because you already know the next 24 hours will decide who keeps custody, who keeps the money, and who gets exposed in public. My name is Deacon, and I learned the hard way that the scariest messages aren't the ones that insult you. The scariest messages are the ones that sound polite, urgent, and unfinished, like a hand slipping a note under your door at midnight. 1 year after our divorce was finalized, 1 year of silence that felt almost professional, like we'd signed a contract to erase each other, my phone buzzed at 9:14 a.m. on a Tuesday with a single line from my ex-wife. "I need to talk. Today." No greeting, no explanation, no please. Just today, capitalized by implication, as if the calendar belonged to her and I was supposed to obey. For a second, I stared at the screen the way you stare at a radar blip that shouldn't be there, because the last time she demanded something today, it ended with me paying for a mediator's office and a moving truck and pretending the ache in my chest was just paperwork. I'm a crisis PR consultant by title, but in practice, I'm a professional at one thing, reading panic. People think panic is loud, but most of the time it's quiet. Panic is a sudden deadline in someone's tone. Panic is a request that doesn't match the relationship anymore. Panic is an ex-wife crawling out of a year-long ghost year with a 2-word leash. I didn't answer right away. That's the first rule. Never reply inside the emotional pocket they create for you. If you answer why, you become a participant. If you answer okay, you become obedient. If you answer what's wrong, you become the medic who runs toward the fire with no equipment. I put my phone face down on my desk and stared at the clean black surface like it might teach me patience. Outside my window, the city was doing ordinary things. A delivery guy double-parked. A woman in a bright coat argued into a headset. Someone laughed near the coffee stand downstairs. Normal life, loud enough to mock the fact that my ex-wife had just reopened a door we both swore was sealed. I opened my calendar, not because I needed to check availability, but because I needed to remind myself I had a life now that didn't include her emergencies. A client call at noon, a dinner reservation at 8, date night. The word date night still felt strange on my schedule after divorce, like a handwritten note on a legal form. I looked back at her message and felt the smallest flicker of anger. Not rage, not heartbreak, the old irritation of being handled. She wasn't asking to talk. She was announcing a demand, like I was still the husband who'd rushed to fix whatever mess she'd made because it was easier than dealing with her sulking. Then I saw the timing for what it was. Today. 1 year of silence, then suddenly today. That doesn't happen because someone misses you. That happens because something is closing in. I needed a response that did 2 things at once. It had to deny her control, and it had to force her to reveal what kind of today this was. Emotional today or legal today. Romantic today or criminal today. The trick is you don't ask the question directly. You turn the room lights on and see what scatters. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I could have written something clean and cold. No, I could have written something polite. Can we schedule? But polite gives them room to steer. Cold gives them room to call you cruel. I wanted something that hit her in the gut, fast, because gut reactions are honest. So I wrote the sentence that I knew would detonate her carefully controlled composure. Today I'm busy. Date night with your sister. I hit send before I could reconsider, because hesitation is where you talk yourself out of clarity. The words went through, and I sat there listening to the quiet in my office like I'd just dropped a coin into a deep well and was waiting to hear whether it hit water. For 3 minutes, nothing happened. Then my phone buzzed again, not a message, a call. Her name lit up the screen like a flare. I didn't answer. Calls are traps. Calls are where tone becomes weapon. Calls are where they cry and accuse and interrupt until you forget what you were trying to learn. She called again, then again, 3 times in under a minute. That wasn't hurt. That wasn't jealousy. That was urgency colliding with an obstacle. My phone buzzed with a message next, longer, fast-typed. What the hell is wrong with you? Don't involve her. This is serious. I need you today. Serious. The word people use when they want to skip details. I waited. I counted to 30, like I was diffusing something. Then I replied with 2 words. Explain. Here. If she had a real clean reason, medical, family, administrative, she'd write it down. If she was trying to manipulate me, she'd push for voice. She'd push for private. She'd push for unrecorded. She didn't explain. She called again. That confirmed it. Whatever was coming was something she didn't want in writing. I opened a new note on my laptop and started a timeline the way I do when a client swears they're innocent and I can hear the sweat between their sentences. 9:14 a.m. I need to talk. Today. 9:19 a.m. My reply. And 9:22 a.m. And 3 calls, 9:25 a.m. This is serious. The details weren't dramatic, but that's the point. Drama lies. Timelines don't. Another message popped up. This time it wasn't from her. It was from Maren. Not Maren who, not Maren from work, just Maren, as if the name would be enough. The only Maren connected to my ex-wife was her sister, the quiet one, the one who used to avoid eye contact at family dinners when my ex started talking about money like it was a game, the one my ex always described as too sensitive in the tone people use when they mean too ethical. Maren's message was short. Are you safe to talk? My throat went dry, and not because I was afraid, because my instincts recognized the shape of the trap from the other side now. If Maren was texting me first, that meant my ex had just run to her, or someone else had run to her, or Maren had been waiting for a reason to break her own silence. Either way, it meant my provocation had worked too well. I answered Maren with one sentence. Yes. Text only. What's going on? 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again. She was typing and deleting, like someone negotiating with fear. Finally, a message landed that made my pulse tighten into a single line. I need to see you today. In public. Please don't tell her. I stared at it for a long moment. My ex wanted to talk today, but her sister wanted to see me today and begged me not to tell her. That wasn't coincidence. That was a fracture line. I wrote back. Where? She sent an address. A cafe near the courthouse, bright windows, constant foot traffic, the kind of place where nobody screams because everyone's being watched. The choice alone told me she wasn't playing games. People who plan to manipulate you choose isolation. People who are scared choose witnesses. I replied, 11, front table, bring nothing that isn't yours to share. That last part mattered. I wasn't going to be handed stolen documents, hacked screenshots, or anything that could be turned into a narrative where I was orchestrating wrongdoing. I wanted lawful truth, not desperate chaos. At 10:02 a.m., my ex texted again. Answer me. This isn't about jealousy. This is about your kid. My kid. We didn't share a child. I read it twice, slowly, letting the lie settle like dust. That line wasn't a mistake. It was a probe, a pressure point she hoped would make me jump without thinking. If I corrected her, she could claim I was cold. If I asked questions, she could pull me into panic. If I ran to meet her, she controlled the room again. I didn't reply. At 10:07 a.m., Maren sent another message. She's panicking because she's on a clock. That was the first real piece of information anyone had offered me. On a clock. Not a feeling, a deadline. I stood up, grabbed my coat, and left my office without telling my assistant where I was going. Not because I was hiding, but because the fewer mouths involved, the fewer stories can leak. In crisis work, information is oxygen. You don't let the wrong person breathe it. On the drive to the cafe, the city looked sharp and bright, like someone had turned the contrast up. I noticed details I normally ignore, the way a police cruiser idled at a red light, the way a billboard flashed a charity gala advertisement with smiling faces and donation numbers, the way my phone kept buzzing with my ex's calls like she was trying to break through glass. I didn't answer. I pulled into the cafe parking lot at 10:51 a.m. and sat in the car for a full minute, hands on the steering wheel, breathing steady. My ex was a year behind me, but she was still trying to step into my day like she owned it. Maren's message proved something else. Her blood had started choosing truth over loyalty. I walked inside and chose a front table, back to the wall, line of sight to the door, the same way you sit when you've spent too much time in rooms where people weaponize secrets. The cafe smelled like espresso and baked sugar, too sweet for what was coming. I ordered black coffee anyway and left my phone face down on the table like a promise to myself. At 10:59 a.m., the door opened and Maren stepped in. She looked smaller than I remembered, shoulders tense, eyes scanning the room like she expected someone to jump out from behind a pastry display. She spotted me, hesitated, then walked over with the careful speed of someone walking onto thin ice. She sat down without smiling, hands clasped tight around a small purse. Her voice came out low. "You shouldn't have said that," she whispered. "About date night?" I asked, calm. "Yes," she said, then swallowed. "But it worked. She's unraveling." I watched her face, the fear under the composure, and I realized the next 24 hours weren't going to be about my ex's feelings at all. They were going to be about what she was running from, and why her own sister had finally decided to run toward me instead. Maren kept her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles looked pale, like the bones were trying to escape. She didn't sip the water I offered her. She didn't glance at the menu. Her eyes stayed on the door, then on my phone, then back to the door again. It was the posture of someone who had lived too long in a house where conversations were monitored and family came with rules. "You said it worked," I said softly. "Tell me what's happening." She swallowed, throat bobbing once, then leaned forward just enough that her voice wouldn't carry. "She thinks I'm with you right now," Maren whispered. "That's why she's calling like that. She thinks you're doing this to her." "To her," I repeated, letting the phrase sit there. "Not with her, not about us, to her." Maren's eyes flicked up and then away, as if I'd touched something sharp. "That's how she frames everything," she said. "If she loses control, it's because someone attacked her." I didn't argue. I waited. Silence is the cleanest tool when someone is trying to decide whether to trust you. Maren exhaled slowly. "I've been feeding you information," she said, and the words came out like confession and relief at the same time. My stomach tightened, but my face didn't change. "About what?" I asked, even though I already knew it wasn't about feelings. "About her money," Maren said. "Your money. The money that disappeared before the divorce was final." I held her gaze. "I assumed it was gone," I said. "That's why I stopped chasing it." Maren's lips pressed together. "She wanted you to stop," she whispered. "She wanted you tired." I felt a cold clarity settle behind my ribs. My ex didn't want closure. She wanted exhaustion. Exhaustion makes people sign things. "Start from the beginning," I said. Maren's eyes darted to the door again, then she reached into her purse and pulled out a small phone. Older model, cracked case, the kind of device you keep for one job only. She didn't slide it across the table. She held it in her palm like a shield. "She pressured me after the divorce," Maren said. "Not at first. At first she was sweet. She told me she missed me, that she needed me, that she didn't trust anyone else. Then she started asking questions." Maren's voice tightened. "Questions about you, where you were living, who you were seeing, what you were working on." I didn't move. "And you answered?" I asked. "At first I didn't realize what it was," she said quickly, shame flashing across her face. "I thought she was lonely. Then she got specific. She wanted screenshots. She wanted times. She wanted proof." "Why?" I asked. Maren's throat worked again. "Because she was moving money," she said, "and she needed to know what you knew." The cafe noise around us felt suddenly far away, like the room had pulled back to give her word space. Moving money. That phrase wasn't romantic, wasn't messy. It was structural. It was the kind of phrase that comes with consequences. "She's not just reckless," Maren continued, voice lower now. "She's organized. She keeps roots, accounts, transfers. She tells herself it's just numbers, just strategy. But it's not. It's laundering." She hesitated. I didn't want to believe it. I still don't want to. I looked at her calmly. "What does she do?" I asked. Maren's eyes shone with fear. "She's an accountant," she whispered. "But not like normal. She works for people who don't like questions. She calls them clients. But they're organized. They move cash. They move it through shell companies and charities and invoices that look clean on paper." I kept my voice neutral. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. Maren's lips trembled. "Because she's on a clock," she said again. "And she's going to drag me down with her if I don't choose a side." I leaned back slightly, giving her air. "What clock?" Maren's fingers tightened around the old phone. 24 hours, she whispered. "She needs me to lie tomorrow." I didn't react outwardly, but inside my mind sharpened to a point. Deadlines create errors. Errors create truth. "Lie about what?" I asked. Maren looked up at me, and for the first time her gaze held steady. "About where the money came from," she said. "About the charity donations, about the offshore accounts, about how it relates to your divorce." I felt the room tilt slightly, not physically, but in meaning. My ex's "I need to talk today" wasn't a plea. It was a preemptive strike. She needed to align stories before someone else asked questions she couldn't charm her way around. "How do you know it's tomorrow?" I asked. Maren's mouth tightened. "Because she showed me the subpoena," she whispered. "Not the whole thing, just enough to scare me into obedience. She said it's a grand jury storm." Her words. She said people are getting hit one by one, and if anyone speaks wrong, everyone falls. My throat went dry. Who's investigating? I asked. Maren hesitated, then said it quietly, like naming it might summon it. IRS Criminal Division, she whispered. She thinks they're coming for her accounts. She thinks they're coming for her boss. She thinks they're coming for the charity director who helps route donations. Charity director. That matched the billboard I'd seen on the drive-in, the smiling faces and donation numbers. In my world, charities aren't automatically clean, they're narrative machines. They turn money into virtue with a glossy photo and a speech. If my ex had tied her laundering routes to a charity, she'd built herself a shield that looked like kindness. I stared at Maren and spoke carefully. I need to ask you something, I said. Everything you show me has to be lawful. Do you understand? She nodded quickly. I know, she whispered. That's why I didn't bring her phone. I didn't bring anything hacked. What did you bring? I asked. Maren set the old phone on the table and slid it toward me, but not far, like she was still deciding whether to let go. Backups, she said. Images. Stuff that synced to a family device. Stuff she left in my cloud because she's sloppy when she thinks I'm loyal. Her voice cracked. And I have something else. I didn't touch the phone yet. What else? Maren's eyes darted to the door again, then back to me. She made me spy, she whispered. The word spy landed heavy. Not because it was dramatic, but because it explained everything. The pressure, the proof requests, the fear. Spying is what people do when they're hiding structures, not feelings. She wanted me to watch you, Maren continued, voice shaking now, to see who you were with, what you were doing. She wanted to know if you were digging into the divorce numbers. She wanted to know if you were talking to anyone. She wanted me to... She stopped, swallowing hard. She wanted me to get your phone unlocked once. She said it like it was nothing. A cold line ran down my spine. Did you? I asked. Maren's eyes widened with horror. No, she said quickly. No, I swear. I never touched your phone. I never went into your place. I never... She pressed her fingers to her temple like she was trying to hold herself together. But I lied to you. I smiled at you at family events. I acted normal, and I hate myself for it. I felt anger rise, then dissolve into something more useful. Maren wasn't my enemy. She was the crack in my ex's armor. You don't hate yourself enough to be here, I said quietly. So tell me why you flipped. Maren's eyes glistened. Because she threatened me, she whispered. She said if I didn't help her tomorrow, she'd tell everyone I was involved. She said she'd send my employer proof that I helped her move money. Maren's voice went thin. I didn't, but she can make it look like I did. She's good at that. Good at that. Yes. My ex had always been good at building narratives that made other people look unstable or guilty. She'd tried it during the divorce, hinting I was cold, controlling, secretive. It didn't ruin me because it was vague, but with money and subpoenas, vagueness becomes weapon. Show me, I said. Maren's hand hovered over the old phone, then she unlocked it with a shaking thumb. She opened a folder of images and scrolled, pausing on a screenshot of a chat thread. The contact name was a nickname I recognized from my ex's old work phone, E-Root. The messages were short, clipped, operational. Not flirty, not romantic, more like instructions. Then Maren tapped another image, a photo of a document header, the kind you'd take quickly at a kitchen counter. It read, Subpoena, Grand Jury, the date visible, tomorrow morning. My pulse remained steady, but my mind clicked into crisis mode. She wasn't panicking because she missed me. She was panicking because a system was about to ask her to explain numbers she'd hidden behind charity stories. Maren swiped to another screenshot, a conversation with someone labeled Evaluator. The words made my stomach turn. It wasn't about money. It was about custody, about report language, about risk scoring, about presenting Deacon as unstable. I stared at the screen and felt something cold and violent move through me. Not violence as action, but as understanding. She hadn't just fought me in divorce. She had tried to rewrite reality with a corrupted, court-appointed evaluator. How did you get this? I asked, voice low. Maren's eyes stayed on the phone. She sent it to me by accident, she whispered. She meant to send it to someone else. Then she deleted it and told me it was nothing. Maren's voice shook. I saved it. I told myself I'd delete it later. I never did. I couldn't. I sat very still. This wasn't just financial betrayal. This was legal sabotage. And it was timed to a deadline. Tomorrow. 24 hours. Listen, I said carefully. If there's a subpoena storm tomorrow, your sister is going to want you aligned. She'll call you. She'll push you. She'll ask you to lie about the money origin. And if you lie, I'm dead, Maren whispered. If you lie, you're complicit, I said. But if you tell the truth, you need protection. Maren's eyes snapped up, fear flooding back. Protection how? I didn't promise miracles. I didn't say I could shield her from federal systems. I said the only thing true. By doing everything on record, I said. By talking to the right people the right way. Maren swallowed hard. You mean the FBI, she whispered. I mean counsel, I said first, because words matter. And if they're involved, then yes, you may need to cooperate formally. But you don't do anything impulsive. You don't call anyone in her network. You don't warn her. Maren's lips trembled. She already knows I'm scared, she whispered. She can hear it in my voice. Then we control what you say next, I replied. Maren glanced down at her phone and then back to me. She's going to show up, she whispered. She'll come here if she thinks I'm with you. I looked around the cafe. Bright windows, people everywhere, a barista calling out names, witnesses, public safety. Maren had chosen this place for a reason. Let her, I said quietly. If she wants to talk today, she can talk where people can see her face. Maren flinched. She'll explode, she whispered. Good, I said. Explosions reveal structure. Her phone buzzed then, and her whole body tensed. She looked at the screen and swallowed. It's her, she whispered. I didn't reach for Maren's phone. I didn't tell her what to say. I leaned forward slightly and gave her a single instruction, the simplest one, the one that keeps you clean. Text only, I said, and say you're busy. Maren's fingers shook as she typed. Then she showed me the screen. Can't talk, busy, tomorrow. She hit send, and the 3 dots appeared instantly on her sister's side, then vanished, then appeared again. Maren's eyes went wide. She's typing, she whispered. I watched the screen like it was a countdown timer, because whatever my ex sent next would tell us exactly what kind of emergency today really was. The message came through in a rush, like she'd been holding her breath while typing. Don't play games, Maren. Where are you? I need you. Today. It's about family. The last word landed like a hook. Family. The word she used when she wanted obedience without questions, loyalty without consent. Maren stared at the screen, and I watched her hands tremble, the way they do when your body knows the danger before your mind admits it. She looked up at me, eyes shining with panic. She's coming, she whispered. Let her, I said quietly. But we don't meet her halfway. Maren swallowed and typed with shaking fingers, keeping it bland, keeping it defensible. I'm out. Can't talk. Tomorrow. She didn't add a location. She didn't add an excuse. Excuses are where people wedge their knives. My ex replied instantly. Tomorrow is too late. There it was again. The clock. Not jealousy. Not hurt. A deadline that didn't care about feelings. Maren's breath caught. What do I do? She whispered. You do nothing fast, I said, and I meant it. Fast is what my ex fed on. Fast choices, fast mistakes, fast apologies, anything that kept the other person from thinking long enough to see the trap. I picked up my coffee and took a slow sip, even though it tasted like burnt nerves. We need to separate 2 things, I told Maren. What she wants today and what she's afraid of tomorrow. Maren's voice came out thin. She's afraid of tomorrow. Then what she wants today is cover, I said. Maren pressed her lips together, fighting tears. She's going to blame me, she whispered. She always does. If something goes wrong, she needs someone smaller to carry it. I nodded. That's why you came, I said. You're done being smaller. The door chimed as someone walked in, and Maren flinched so hard her chair scraped the floor. I glanced up, ready for my ex to stride in like she owned the air, but it was just an older man in a puffy jacket, shaking rain off his sleeves. Maren exhaled like she'd been underwater. Okay, I said softly. Here's what we do next. You've shown me enough to confirm there's a legal sabotage angle and a financial angle. Both matter, but they move differently. Maren blinked. What do you mean? Custody sabotage is a clean story with a clean villain, I said. It belongs in a courthouse. The money story is messier because money hides behind charity language, behind titles, behind people who smile for photos. I tapped the table lightly once, like punctuation. So we build 2 ledgers, one for court, one for pattern. Maren looked at me like I was speaking a language she hadn't been allowed to learn. I don't know how to do that, she whispered. You don't have to, I said. You just have to tell the truth about what you already lawfully have. I took out my laptop, not because I wanted to look like I was running an operation in a cafe, but because time mattered and I wasn't going to waste it pretending this was normal. I opened a blank document and wrote 2 headers in black letters, custody and assets. Under custody, I listed what I'd seen in her screenshots in neutral terms. Evaluator chat images, report language coordination, timing relative to divorce. Under assets I wrote, charity conduit name, offshore LLC references, subpoena header, tomorrow deadline. Maren leaned forward, eyes glued to the screen. What about the people? She asked. We add people only when the paper supports it, I said. Otherwise it becomes gossip. She swallowed. The charity director, she whispered. She's friends with him. She shows up at those events. She wears gowns and talks about community. I remembered the billboard again, smiling faces, donation numbers, a gala date. What's his name? I asked. Maren hesitated, then said it quietly. Graham Vale. The name hit with a soft familiarity, not because I knew him personally, but because I'd seen his kind in my work. Polished operators who stand behind microphones and let applause wash their fingerprints away. People who turn money into optics and optics into protection. I typed it under assets with a note. Graham Vale, charity director, alleged conduit. Maren's phone buzzed again. She startled. It was a call this time. Her sister, my ex. Maren stared at it like it was a live wire. She's calling, she whispered. Don't answer, I said. She'll keep calling, Maren said, voice shaking. Then let her build her own record, I replied. Repeated calls after you said text only and tomorrow is pressure. Pressure is a fact. Maren's finger hovered, then she declined the call. The phone buzzed again immediately. She declined again. The 3rd time it buzzed, she didn't even look. She just turned it face down like I had done in my office, as if copying calm might teach her body to believe it. You're not scared of her, I said gently. You're scared of what she'll do. Maren's eyes glistened. She'll ruin me, she whispered. She'll tell everyone I'm unstable. She'll say I'm jealous. She'll say whatever saves her, I finished. That's why we don't fight her with emotion. We fight her with structure. Maren nodded, trembling. Okay, she said, as if saying the word could build a spine. I opened a browser window and began searching public records and filings, not hacking, not digging into anything private, just the boring surface, corporate registries, charity public reports, press releases, the glossy things people post because they believe gloss is truth. Maren watched the screen as I typed Graham Vale Charity, then narrowed it to filings, then to a list of associated LLC names that appeared in public documents. It took longer than most people think, not because the information is hidden, but because it's spread out like confetti. A donor list here, a board member bio there, a press release with a sponsor footer. It's never one dramatic link. It's repetition that becomes pattern. There, Maren whispered suddenly, pointing at the screen. A name on a sponsor list. An LLC that matched a fragment from one of the screenshots she'd shown me. The letters weren't unique, but the structure was. The same formatting, the same punctuation in the name, the same kind of carelessness that happens when someone copies and pastes a shell name across multiple documents without thinking anyone will notice. I clicked into the associated filings and saw it again. The LLC listed as a donation partner in a public event program PDF. Another partner name listed as a logistics sponsor. The charity's language made it look noble, but the corporate registry made it look like what it was, a small company with no real public footprint except in the shadow of money. I didn't say, aha. I didn't smile. I just opened a new row in my ledger and wrote, LLCX appears in charity program as sponsor. LLCX registered to Agent Y associated with 2 other entities tied to X's keywords. Maren's breathing quickened. So it's real, she whispered. It's consistent, I corrected. Consistency is what matters. She stared at the screen, then looked down at her hands like they belonged to someone else. Why would she pull you into it again? She asked. Why now? I leaned back, eyes on the ledger. Because something is moving tomorrow, I said, and she needs your voice to smooth the edges. Maren's face tightened. She said the subpoena storm would hit everyone, she whispered. That means she's not just worried about herself. She's worried about the whole network. I didn't use the word network out loud, but it settled between us anyway. People like my ex don't run alone. They run as part of systems that depend on everyone staying coordinated. When one person panics, the entire structure starts vibrating. My phone buzzed on the table. Not her name, an unknown number. I stared at it, and something in my gut tightened. Unknown numbers on days like this are either meaningless or important. There's rarely a middle. I let it ring out. A minute later, it buzzed again. Same number. I stood, picked up my phone, and walked a few steps away from the table, keeping Maren in my line of sight. I answered without greeting. Yes? A man's voice, calm, clipped. Deacon? Yes, I said, and my tone stayed neutral. This is Alan Briggs, he said. We met briefly during the custody evaluation phase last year. I was assisting with administrative intake for Dr. Leland's office. Dr. Leland, the evaluator, the same name in Maren's screenshots. My spine went cold. What do you want? I asked. There was a pause. I need to correct something, the man said. There were irregularities in how that evaluation was compiled. Files were accessed from a remote login that was not documented properly. Maren had stood up without me noticing. She was watching me now like she could hear the words through my face. Why are you calling me? I asked, voice low. Because an inquiry was opened, he said, and your name is in the file. There may be a motion to review the evaluation's integrity. My mouth went dry. Today? I asked. Another pause. Tomorrow morning, he said. The same clock. Send it in writing, I said instantly. Email. Official channel. I can, he said, and his voice tightened slightly like he didn't like paper trails. But I need to know if you intend to escalate. I intend to protect my child's record, I said, even though we didn't share a child, because in legal language, child can mean custody context, and I wasn't going to correct him on the phone. Email me. He hesitated, then said, Fine, and hung up. I stood there for a moment, phone in my hand, feeling the world shift. The evaluator angle wasn't just a fear Maren carried, it was moving. It had reached the level where administrative staff were calling me with nervous voices and vague warnings. I walked back to the table. Maren's eyes were wide. Who was that? She whispered. Someone from the evaluator's office, I said. He said an inquiry is opening tomorrow morning. Maren's face crumpled for half a second, then hardened into something like resolve. So, she's not just in trouble, she whispered. She's desperate. I nodded. And desperate people do reckless things, I said. Which means tonight matters. Maren blinked. Tonight? I tapped the billboard image still burned in my memory. That charity gala advertisement, I said. Do you know when it is? Maren swallowed. Tonight, she whispered. Opening night at Vale's restaurant, then the gala rehearsal. She said she'd be there. I stared at her. She invited you? I asked. Maren hesitated, then nodded. She wants me close, she whispered, so she can control what I say tomorrow. My mind moved fast now, but my voice stayed calm. She's going to create a stage, I said. Family dinner, public venue, witnesses, not because she wants reconciliation, because she wants you on camera smiling. She wants a picture that says, we're fine. That picture becomes a shield. Maren's lips trembled. And if I don't go, she'll say I'm unstable, she whispered. If you do go, I said, you go on your terms, public, calm, no scenes, and you don't carry anything illegal. No stolen device, no secret access, only what you already lawfully have and what you already know. Maren nodded slowly, like she was walking herself into fear with her eyes open. She'll show up, she whispered. She'll smile like everything is normal. And she'll need you to say something specific, I said. She'll try to script you. Maren swallowed. She already did, she whispered. She told me what to say tomorrow if anyone asks about the donations. Then we don't argue with her, I said. We ask one neutral question and let her fill the silence. Maren's eyes searched mine. What question? I didn't answer right away. I looked at the ledger, the public filings, the clock, the evaluator call, the subpoena header. Then I chose the simplest blade. Ask her who drafted the evaluator report language, I said softly. Ask it like you're curious. Ask it while people can hear. Maren went pale. She'll kill me, she whispered. She'll try, I said. But she can't kill a question. She can only answer it or refuse it. Maren's phone buzzed again, and this time she didn't flinch. She picked it up, looked at the screen, and her expression shifted into a strange, hollow calm. It's an invitation, she whispered, showing me the text from my ex. Family dinner tonight, Vale's opening night. Be there. We need to talk before tomorrow. Maren looked up at me, and her eyes weren't just scared anymore. They were determined. Deacon, she whispered, voice tight. If I go, will you be there? I stared at her, hearing the cafe noises, the clink of cups, the door chime, all of it suddenly too loud. Yes, I said quietly. but not as her audience. Maren nodded once, like a pact. Okay, she whispered. Then her phone buzzed again immediately, a second message from my ex, shorter, colder, the kind of line that turns your blood into ice, and Maren's lips parted as she read it, because she finally understood what my ex would do if blood loyalty failed. She turned the screen toward me with shaking hands, and I read the sentence that made the room feel smaller. If you don't show up tonight, I'll tell them you helped me move it. My ex's threat sat on Maren's screen like a stamped verdict. If you don't show up tonight, I'll tell them you helped me move it. The language was casual, almost bored, like she was reminding her little sister to bring a jacket. But it wasn't casual. It was leverage. It was the kind of sentence you only send when you believe blood belongs to you. Maren's hands shook as she locked the phone and slid it back into her purse. She looked up at me, eyes glassy, and I could see the war inside her. Loyalty versus survival, fear versus dignity, the old childhood reflex to please the loudest person in the room. She'd been trained to fold. Tonight would be the first time she tried to stay upright. She can't do that, Maren whispered, but the way she said it wasn't confidence. It was hope. She can, I said quietly, and that's why we don't give her a clean angle. Maren swallowed. What do you mean? I mean we stop thinking like sisters, I said. We think like records. Maren stared at me like she wanted to borrow my spine for an hour. I don't want to destroy her, she whispered. I know, I said, but she's comfortable destroying you. We paid for our drinks separately, another small detail that mattered. The cleaner the boundaries, the harder it is for anyone to claim collusion. When we stepped outside, the air was colder than it had been an hour ago, the sky pressing low and gray as if the city itself was holding its breath. Maren walked close to the curb, shoulders tight, scanning reflections in windows like she expected my ex to appear in any pane of glass. Listen, I said as we crossed the street toward my car. If you go tonight, you go calm, you don't argue, you don't accuse, you don't explain yourself. Maren's laugh came out small and broken. That's all I ever do, she whispered. Explain myself. Not tonight, I said. Tonight you ask one neutral question and you let her answer. If she refuses, that refusal is the answer. Maren stopped walking for a second, then hurried to catch up. What if she screams? She asked. She's going to, I said, but screaming doesn't land well in a room full of strangers. Maren's fingers twisted together. And what about the threat? She asked. What if she tells them anyway? Then she tells them anyway, I said, and you respond with structure. You don't respond with tears. Maren flinched at the word tears, like it was an insult. I can't help it, she whispered. You can, I said, and I wasn't being kind. I was being honest. You've been helping it your whole life by giving her what she wants. Her eyes flicked up to mine, and something hard stirred there. Okay, she said, almost inaudible. I drove us to a different place first, not the restaurant. A print shop near my office that stayed open late, bright fluorescent lights, and bored employees who didn't ask questions. Maren watched me walk in and ask for 2 sets of prints, public filings, the charity program sponsor list, the corporate registry pages, and the screenshot of the evaluator chat images she'd lawfully saved. I didn't print anything that could be interpreted as stolen data. I printed what was defensible. Headers, dates, lists, public documents. Maren stared at the pages as they slid out warm, like paper could burn her. I'm not bringing those in there, she whispered. I'm not asking you to, I said. These are for after. Tonight isn't about showing, it's about hearing. She looked confused, and that was the problem. People think exposure is the moment you slap proof on a table. That's not exposure. That's a fight. Exposure is when someone speaks in public and doesn't realize they're leaving fingerprints. I put the prints into a folder and left them in my glove compartment. Then I handed Maren a small notebook and a pen. What's this? She asked. Contemporaneous notes, I said. Time, place, what was said, who was present. Maren blinked. Like, writing it down? Yes, I said. Simple, legal, boring, powerful. She held the notebook like she'd never been allowed to own her own memory before. What if she sees me? She asked. Then you're taking notes about menu options, I said. No theatrics, Maren nodded slowly. We sat in the car for a moment while the city moved around us, headlights, wet streets, people hurrying toward warm places. I looked at her profile in the dashboard light and saw a woman who had been trained to be a supporting character in her sister's story. Tonight, she would try to become a witness instead. Vale's restaurant sat on a corner downtown, all glass and warm light. the kind of place designed to look expensive without saying it out loud. A velvet rope, a host stand, a branded step-and-repeat backdrop with the charity's logo and sponsor names. Cameras flashed, not from journalists, but from people who wanted to look like they belonged. The same crowd that applauds at speeches and never asks where money came from. Maren's breathing quickened as we parked. "She chose this," Maren whispered. "She chose a room full of eyes." "Exactly," I said. "She wants a photo of you smiling beside her. She wants to launder fear into normal." Maren gripped the notebook in her purse. "What if she pulls me aside?" she asked. "She will," I said. "So you don't go anywhere private, not the kitchen corridor, not the back patio, not the car." Maren swallowed hard. "She's going to hate me," she whispered. "She already hates the part of you that can say no," I replied. We walked toward the entrance together, but not touching, not acting like a couple, not giving my ex any narrative ammunition. At the door, I let Maren go first. She belonged here by invitation, I belonged here by proximity, and that difference mattered. The host smiled brightly and checked Maren's name on a list. "Welcome," he said, and handed her a wristband. Then he looked at me, polite but assessing. "I'm with her," I said, keeping it vague and true. He hesitated, then handed me a guest card, the kind that said +1 without printing the word. The lobby was a shrine to optics. Framed photos of the charity's past events, donors smiling under chandeliers, plaques with names in gold. Everything screamed virtue. And then, like the universe had perfect timing, my ex appeared. She stepped in from the side like she'd been waiting in the wings, dressed in a black cocktail dress that fit like armor, hair perfect, lipstick precise. She wore confidence the way some people wear perfume, heavy enough to make you dizzy. When she saw me, her smile sharpened, not surprise, not joy, but a predator recognizing a variable she hadn't planned for. "Deacon," she said, dragging my name through the air like she owned it. "Of course." Maren stiffened beside me. My ex's eyes moved to her sister, and the smile softened into something poisonous and sweet. "Maren," she said warmly, opening her arms. "There you are. Thank God." Maren didn't step into the hug right away. It was a small pause, but it was the first crack in the old dynamic. My ex's eyes narrowed slightly, then she hugged Maren anyway, squeezing a little too tight, as if pressure could reset her. When she released, she looked directly at Maren and lowered her voice. "We need to talk," she said. "Now." Maren's throat worked. Her fingers tightened around her purse strap. "Here is fine," she said, and her voice shook. But she said it. My ex's smile froze for a fraction of a second. Then she glanced around as if noticing for the first time that the lobby was full of witnesses. She leaned closer to Maren, teeth still smiling. "Not here," she whispered. Maren held her ground. "Here," she repeated, softer, but still a boundary. My ex's eyes flashed, and she pivoted smoothly, shifting tactics. She turned to me with a laugh that sounded rehearsed. "So," she said brightly, "date night with my sister, that's the level you've sunk to?" I didn't react to the bait. "You texted me," I said calmly. "Urgent. Same day." I declined. Her smile tightened. "Declined," she repeated, as if the concept offended her. Then her gaze slid back to Maren. "Come," she said, a command disguised as invitation. "I want you to meet Graham." Before Maren could answer, my ex guided her forward with a hand at her elbow, subtle, controlling, practiced. Maren glanced back at me, panic in her eyes. I followed at a respectful distance. Not as a rescuer, as a witness. We moved deeper into the restaurant where the sound changed, glasses clinking, low music, laughter layered over laughter. A small stage had been set up near the bar with a microphone and a little PA speaker. Someone was testing audio, and every few seconds a faint squeal of feedback cut through the chatter like a warning. Graham Vale stood near the stage, greeting people with open palms and shining teeth. He looked exactly like his press photos, suit crisp, hair perfect, face calibrated for trust. When my ex approached him, he lit up like she was an honored guest, not a liability. "There she is," Vale said warmly, taking my ex's hands like they were partners in virtue. "Our miracle worker." My ex laughed lightly. "Please," she said, voice honey. "I'm just helpful." Vale's eyes moved to Maren. "And you must be the sister," he said, and the way he said sister carried weight, like he understood the blood tether without needing it explained. "Welcome. Family is everything." Maren forced a small smile. She looked like she wanted to disappear into her own skin. "And this," my ex said, turning slightly, "is Deacon, my ex." Vale's smile didn't flicker, but his eyes sharpened a fraction. "Deacon," he said smoothly, "I've heard of you. Crisis PR?" I nodded once. "That's right." Then you understand how ugly rumors can be, Vale said, still smiling. The comment was casual, almost friendly, but the message was clear. We know how to play optics, too. I didn't respond. Silence is often the cleanest answer to a threat delivered with a smile. My ex leaned closer to Maren, still smiling for Vale, but speaking to her sister. Tomorrow, she murmured. When they ask, you say the donations were personal philanthropy. You say you watched me donate it. You say you don't know anything else. Maren's face went pale. The script. Right there, in public. Dressed up as family guidance. Vale chuckled softly. Ladies, he said, no business tonight. Tonight we celebrate. My ex laughed along, but her hand tightened again at Maren's elbow, nails pressing just enough to be felt. Maren didn't flinch this time. She took a slow breath, opened her purse slightly, and slid her fingers onto the notebook without taking it out. Then she did what we planned. Not loud, not angry, just curious. Maren looked at my ex and asked, gently, almost innocently, who wrote the custody evaluation language? The question was so quiet, my ex didn't react at first. Then her eyes snapped to Maren's face, and I saw the exact moment she understood what was happening. Her little sister wasn't here to be managed. My ex's smile stayed on, but it became brittle. What? She said, laugh too high. Maren, don't be weird. Maren held her gaze, voice soft but steady. I'm not being weird, she said. I just want to know. Who wrote it? Vale's smile dimmed slightly, just enough to show he'd noticed the shift. The audio tech on the stage tapped the microphone again, and the speaker gave a faint squeal of feedback, sharp and sudden. Heads turned. People glanced over. Attention rippled across the room. My ex swallowed once. She tried to laugh it off. We're not doing this, she said, still smiling. Maren didn't raise her voice. Tomorrow is too late, she repeated, using my ex's own words like a mirror. But for a heartbeat, my ex looked like she might strike her with language, with a cutting remark, with a public humiliation. Then she changed tactics again, leaning closer, voice low and dangerous. You're going to regret this, she whispered. And in the same second, the microphone on the stage popped loudly, an accidental burst of sound, and the room fell quieter, people turning, eyes drifting toward us as if the universe had decided to aim a spotlight. My ex noticed the eyes. Vale noticed too. And I watched my ex realize that whatever she said next wouldn't belong only to family anymore. Because in rooms like this, the lie doesn't just fail, it echoes. For a second, my ex's face stayed perfectly arranged, smile fixed, chin angled, eyes bright the way they get when she's about to charm her way out of trouble. But the microphone's pop had changed the room's temperature. People weren't staring yet, not openly, but attention had shifted. The kind of shift you feel in your skin. When a group senses friction, they look for the source like moths turning toward light. Vale's hand remained on my ex's forearm, a friendly touch that also served as restraint. His smile stayed warm, but his eyes weren't. He wasn't worried about my ex's feelings. He was worried about optics. And optics, for men like him, are oxygen. My dear, Vale said gently, voice carrying just enough to sound gracious. Tonight is about celebration. Let's not let family complications distract from the cause. My ex laughed lightly, the sound too practiced. Of course, she said, and she turned her head toward Maren with a look that could have passed for affection if you didn't understand the history behind it. Maren's just nervous, she added. She gets anxious. There it was. The first attempt to paint her sister as unstable, delivered with sugar. Maren went still. Her shoulders tensed, but she didn't apologize, didn't backpedal, didn't start explaining herself. That alone was new. I watched her take a slow breath through her nose like she was holding a door shut inside her. I'm not anxious, Maren said softly. I'm asking a question. My ex's smile tightened. In front of people? She asked, feigning concern. Now? Really? Maren's fingers slid over the notebook in her purse, and she nodded once. Yes, she said, and her voice shook slightly, but it held. Because tomorrow is too late. The words hung in the air like smoke. Vale's eyes narrowed a fraction. He didn't know the subpoena details yet, but he knew the scent of urgency when it entered a room. He was a man who lived by controlling the story, and urgency is what ruins stories. My ex shifted closer to Maren, still smiling for the room, but her voice dropped into a dangerous whisper meant only for blood. Stop, she hissed through her teeth. Right now. Maren didn't flinch. She looked at her sister the way a person looks at a stranger wearing a familiar face. Who wrote the custody evaluation language? She asked again. Same calm tone, same phrasing, no emotion to grab. My ex blinked, and that blink was the crack. People think tells are big, shaking hands, stutters. In my experience, the cleanest tell is a pause that shouldn't exist. The brief delay where someone reaches for a script and finds the page missing. Vale sensed it too. His smile dulled, and his gaze flicked past us toward the stage where the audio tech was fiddling with the mic again. The speaker emitted another faint squeal, not loud enough to stop conversation entirely, but loud enough to make a few nearby guests glance over. A ripple of eyes. A ripple of attention. My ex noticed the ripple and pivoted instantly into performance mode. She laughed, brighter now, and touched Maren's cheek lightly, the way older sisters do when they want to infantilize. "Sweetheart," she said, voice warm and condescending, "you're mixing things up. No one wrote anything. Evaluations are standard." Maren didn't bite the bait. She didn't argue the details. She asked the simplest follow-up question in the world. "So you didn't speak to the evaluator at all?" she said. My ex's eyes flashed, anger slipping out for half a second before she shoved it back behind the smile. "Of course I spoke to him," she said quickly, then realized what she'd admitted and tried to soften it. "Everyone speaks to the evaluator. That's normal." I saw Vale's jaw tighten slightly. Normal wasn't the issue. The issue was the speed with which she'd claimed innocence and then confessed contact. In an ordinary family argument, it wouldn't matter. In a room where people exist to manage risk, inconsistency matters. Maren nodded slowly, as if she were thinking out loud. "And you discussed what he would write?" she asked. My ex's laugh came out sharper. "Maren," she warned, her voice carrying a little more now. A few heads turned in our direction, and then away again, pretending they hadn't noticed. That's how polite crowds react to conflict. They pretend they don't see it, but they collect it anyway. Vale finally removed his hand from my ex's forearm and stepped half a pace back, creating space between himself and the problem without making it obvious. That move told me more than any speech could. He was already calculating distance. My ex noticed his retreat and tried to anchor him again. "Graham," she said lightly, turning toward him, "Maren's been under a lot of stress. She's emotional." Maren's face tightened at that word. Emotional. The label my ex had used her whole life to make her small. Maren's eyes flicked to me for the briefest moment, a silent question. Do I keep going? Do I break? I gave her nothing theatrical, just a slow nod. Witness, not savior. Maren turned back to my ex and asked quietly, "Why did you tell me what to say tomorrow?" Silence. Real silence this time. Not the fake pause of a cocktail party. The kind of silence that makes glass clinks sound loud. Vale's eyes sharpened. His smile vanished completely for a moment, replaced by alertness. My ex's mouth opened, then closed. She looked around and realized too late that people were closer than she thought. A couple near us had stopped laughing. A man at the bar was watching with lazy curiosity. Someone behind Vale lifted a phone slightly, not obviously recording, but not recording either. My ex's voice dropped. "Because I'm trying to protect you," she said, and she said it like a threat wrapped in love. "From what?" Maren asked, same tone. My ex exhaled, a thin line of impatience. "From being dragged into adult matters," she snapped, and then forced a laugh as if she'd made a joke. "You know how you get." That was her mistake. That insult had always worked in private. In public, it sounded cruel. It made her look like what she was, a woman who used her sister's softness as a lever. Vale cleared his throat gently. "Perhaps we should all take a breath," he said, voice smooth, attempting to reclaim the room. "Maren, if you're upset, we can discuss this privately another time." Maren's eyes widened slightly, and I could see her realize the obvious. Vale was trying to move her out of public view, move the problem behind a door, control the spill. Maren shook her head, barely. "No," she said. "Not private." My ex's smile shattered. "Are you trying to humiliate me?" she hissed, the words slipping out too loud. Vale's eyes widened a fraction. The room heard that. Humiliate. The word hit like a bell. It wasn't about family anymore. It was about reputation. My ex realized what she'd done and tried to correct. "I mean," she stammered, then forced a laugh. "This is ridiculous." Maren's voice grew steadier. "You threatened me," she said simply. "You said you'd tell them I helped you move it." My ex went still, as if the sentence had turned her into stone. Vale's head tilted slightly, like he'd just heard a word he didn't expect to exist in his curated restaurant. "Move what?" Vale asked, and the question was gentle but lethal. My ex's eyes snapped to him, then to Maren, and for the first time I saw real fear crack through her polish. Not fear of me, fear of a donor king learning something ugly on opening night. It's nothing, my ex said quickly. She's misunderstanding. Maren didn't argue. She opened her purse, pulled out the notebook, and with trembling hands wrote something down. Time, Vale's question, my ex's response. The act was simple, and it changed everything. Writing makes words heavier. Writing means you're not just talking, you're documenting. Vale watched the pen move, and something shifted behind his eyes. He was no longer looking at Maren like a nervous little sister. He was looking at her like a liability he didn't want near his microphone. My ex stepped closer to Maren, voice low, sharp. "Put that away," she hissed. Maren looked up, eyes wet but steady. "No," she said. My ex's hand twitched as if she might grab the notebook, then she stopped herself because the room had eyes now. She smiled again, too wide, too desperate. "Graham," she said brightly, "let's not entertain this. You know how people get when they're stressed." Vale didn't answer immediately. He just stared at my ex for a long moment. Then his gaze moved to me, as if I were an expert he could consult without admitting it. "You're Deacon," Vale said slowly. "Crisis PR." "Yes," I said. Vale's voice remained smooth, but his eyes had hardened. "Then you understand," he said carefully, "that certain phrases cannot be said in certain rooms." I kept my tone neutral. "I understand that rooms don't cause problems," I said. "They reveal them." Vale's jaw tightened. He didn't like that answer, but he couldn't refute it. My ex laughed sharply. "Oh my God," she said, voice rising. "This is a setup. You two planned this." That was her last move, conspiracy. Make it look coordinated so she can dismiss it as a petty plot. But her voice was too loud, her face too tense, her desperation too visible. In that crowd, people could forgive a family spat. They couldn't ignore a woman screaming "set up" on a charity night while her sister took notes. The microphone on the stage squealed again, louder this time. The audio tech tapped it nervously. "Testing," he said into the mic, and the word boomed across the restaurant, drawing more attention like a hook catching fabric. Heads turned. Conversations thinned. The room leaned towards sound. My ex saw the eyes and panicked. She leaned toward Maren, voice suddenly sweet. "Come with me," she whispered. "We'll talk in the ladies' room. Just us." Maren shook her head. "No private rooms," she said, and the firmness in her tone surprised even her. My ex's face contorted, and she hissed, barely audible. "You're going to ruin everything." Maren looked at her sister, tears finally spilling down her cheeks, and whispered back, "You already did." Vale lifted a hand, trying to regain control. "Everyone," he said warmly, stepping toward the stage as if he could redirect energy with a speech, "if I can have your attention—" My ex seized on the distraction. She grabbed Maren's elbow and tugged, attempting to pull her away while the room looked elsewhere. It wasn't violent, it was control. It was the oldest move in their family. Guide the softer one out of sight before she can embarrass you. Maren stumbled a step, then stopped, planting her feet. And in that small resistance, my ex lost patience. "Why are you doing this?" my ex snapped, louder than she intended. Maren's voice rose for the first time, not screaming, just clear enough to cut. "Because tomorrow you want me to lie," she said, "and I'm done lying for you." The room heard that. The words didn't even need context. Lie. Tomorrow. Done lying. Vale froze mid-step. The microphone hissed softly. A few people lifted phones now, no longer pretending. My ex stood there with her hand still on Maren's arm, and suddenly she looked like what she'd been hiding all night, a woman trying to physically steer the truth away from witnesses. She released Maren's arm slowly, forcing her smile back on, but the room had already seen the grip. My ex turned to Vale, laughing too loud. "Family drama," she said, waving a hand as if dismissing it. You know how it is." Vale didn't laugh. He stared at her with a calm that felt like judgment. And then Maren did the most dangerous thing of all. She turned her head slightly toward the stage, toward the microphone, toward the crowd that was pretending not to listen. And she asked clearly, softly, like she was speaking to one person, but knew the room would collect it. "Graham," she said, "why is my sister telling me what to say before a grand jury subpoena tomorrow?" The sentence landed like a glass dropped on marble. And in the sudden, stunned silence, I watched my ex's face do something it hadn't done all night. It stopped performing. Because she finally understood this wasn't a family fight anymore. It was a public record beginning to form. The room didn't explode the way people imagine scandals explode. It didn't turn into shouting or fists or a dramatic sprint for the exit. What happened was worse for my ex and worse for Vale. The room went polite. Laughter died in pockets. Glasses stopped clinking for a beat. Conversations thinned into whispers, the kind of silence that doesn't announce itself, but makes your skin prickle because you can feel dozens of strangers quietly deciding what they believe. My ex blinked fast, then forced a bright laugh that sounded like it belonged to a different night. Grand jury? She repeated, as if the phrase was a foreign language Maren had mispronounced. Maren, what are you even talking about? Vale's face had gone still, but his eyes were moving, measuring faces, measuring phones, measuring how far the microphone on the stage was from this cluster of tension. Maren, Vale said gently, stepping closer with a host's posture and a handler's intention, I think this is the wrong time and place for legal terminology. If you're confused about something, we can make sure you get support privately. Maren's throat bobbed as she swallowed. Her cheeks were wet, but her chin stayed lifted. I'm not confused, she said, voice trembling but clear. She told me to prepare what I'd say tomorrow. My ex's smile tightened into a grimace. I told you to calm down, she snapped, then caught herself and softened instantly. I told you not to spiral. That's what I said. Vale's gaze flicked to my ex. Spiral. Another word meant to make Maren look unstable. It would have worked in a kitchen. Here, it sounded like cruelty. A donor couple nearby pretended to study a framed photo on the wall, but their bodies angled toward us. Someone closer to the bar raised their phone a little higher. Not dramatically, just enough. Vale noticed. He pivoted smoothly, stepping half a pace toward the stage and lifting a hand toward the audio tech. Cut the mic test, he murmured, still smiling. Then he looked back at us and dropped his voice. Everyone, he said softly. Let's take a breath. We're here for the cause. My ex tried to laugh again. Exactly, she said, too quickly. This is embarrassing. Maren's been stressed and... Maren interrupted very quietly. Don't, she said. My ex froze. That one syllable was small, but it was rebellion. It was the first time Maren had ever told her no in front of witnesses. Vale's expression tightened. Maren, he said, tone still gentle but firmer now. If there are serious concerns, we can arrange a private conversation with appropriate counsel present, but making accusations in a public venue can be harmful to everyone involved. My ex seized that opening like a lifeline. See? She said, turning to Maren. You're doing it again. You're making things up, and you're going to hurt people. Maren's fingers tightened around her notebook. She didn't argue. She didn't accuse. She did what we planned. She made my ex repeat herself. Why did you tell me what to say tomorrow? Maren asked again, same neutral tone, like she was asking about dinner reservations. My ex's eyes flashed. Because I care about you, she snapped. Because you don't understand how dangerous your imagination can be. Vale's jaw clenched slightly at the word dangerous. He didn't want that word anywhere near his brand new opening night. I stepped in, not with emotion, but with a boundary. If you want to discuss concerns, I said to Vale calmly, there's a way to do it that doesn't involve labeling someone unstable in front of a room. Vale's eyes narrowed at me, then softened into something professional. Mr. Mercer, he said, I respect your work, but I need my opening night to remain contained. Contained. That was his real language. Not justice, not truth. Contained. My ex turned toward me, smile gone now, voice low and venomous. You planned this, she hissed. You used her. Maren flinched at that, and for a heartbeat I saw the old guilt return, the fear that she was betraying blood. My ex was reaching for the oldest button in their family. Make Maren feel disloyal, then make her apologize for having a spine. But Maren surprised both of us. She didn't fold. I came to him, she said quietly, because you threatened me. My ex laughed, sharp and ugly. Threatened you? She repeated, louder now. Maren, you're dramatic. Always have been. You don't even hear yourself. Vale lifted a hand. Enough, he said, voice calm but firm. And that was the moment I knew he wasn't choosing my ex. He was choosing himself. The second the word grand jury entered his restaurant, he stopped seeing her as a donor and started seeing her as a match near gasoline. Maren, Vale continued, I'm going to ask you respectfully to step outside with a member of my staff so we can make sure you're okay. Deacon, if you'd like to accompany her, that's fine, but we cannot continue this conversation here. My ex's head snapped toward him. Graham, she said, voice tight. This is my family. And this is my business, Vale replied, still polite, but there was iron under it. My ex looked around, finally registering the faces watching, the phones lifted, the way the room had subtly decided she was the problem. Her eyes widened with panic, and then she did what she always did when panic cornered her. She tried to control the narrative with a bigger narrative. She raised her voice and smiled too widely. "Everyone," she said, turning slightly as if addressing the crowd, "I'm so sorry. My sister has been struggling. Divorce affects families in strange ways." The sentence was aimed at me like a knife wrapped in velvet. Blame the divorce, blame me, blame instability. Maren's face crumpled, tears spilling again. But she didn't run. She just opened her notebook and wrote, "Time. Exact words. Divorce affects families." The way my ex tried to turn her pain into a public smear. Vale saw the pen moving and stiffened. He didn't like paper in his room. Paper becomes record. Record becomes risk. A staff member approached, hovering nervously. Vale nodded toward the entrance, a silent command. "Please," he said to Maren, "let's get you some air." Maren stood up slowly. Her legs looked like they might give out, but they didn't. She looked at my ex. One last glance that held grief and anger and something like pity. My ex's lips trembled. "Maren," she said, voice suddenly soft. "Don't do this." Maren's voice was barely a whisper. "You did this," she said. We walked out together, past the host stand, past the step-and-repeat backdrop with the charity logo shining under warm lights. Behind us, the restaurant resumed its noise in hesitant waves, like a crowd returning to the performance after a curtain slip. Outside, the air hit us cold and clean. Maren leaned against the brick wall and shook, and for a moment she looked like she might break in half. I didn't touch her. I didn't comfort her with empty reassurance. I stood beside her and let her breathe through the aftermath. "Did I ruin it?" she whispered. "You interrupted the lie," I said calmly. "That's not ruining. That's reality." Maren wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand, furious at her own tears. "She's going to destroy me," she said. "She's going to try," I replied. "Tonight proved she's willing. That means we move faster." Maren's phone buzzed. She looked down, and her shoulders tensed. "She's texting," Maren whispered. I didn't ask to see it yet. I watched Maren's face as she read, because faces tell the truth before words do. Her eyes widened, her lips parted. "She says if I don't come back in, she'll tell everyone I'm having a breakdown," she whispered. "She says she'll tell my employer I'm unstable." "Save it," I said. "Screenshot it. Timestamp." Maren blinked. "I thought we weren't doing?" "We're not escalating," I said. "We're preserving. There's a difference." Maren nodded, hands shaking as she saved it. Then she looked up at me like she needed permission to survive. "What do we do now?" "We stop playing defense inside her story," I said. "We move to records she can't rewrite." I drove Maren back to her apartment, not to hide her, but to put her somewhere she could lock a door and breathe. The whole way there, my ex's calls hit Maren's phone like a drumbeat. She didn't answer. She didn't decline. She let them ring and ring and ring. Pressure documented. When we arrived, Maren stood in her doorway with her keys in hand, still trembling. "She's going to show up," she whispered. "If she does, you don't open the door," I said. "You don't argue in a hallway. You don't do anything private." Maren nodded, then hesitated. "Are you going to be okay?" she asked, and the question surprised me. I'd been the calm one all night. I'd been the structure. But structure still feels things. It just doesn't let feelings drive. "I'm fine," I said. I've lived through her stories before. This time we're writing our own record. Maren swallowed. "Tomorrow," she whispered. "Yes," I said. "Tomorrow morning we file." I went home and didn't sleep. Not because I was spiraling, but because I was building. I opened my laptop and created a clean packet. Nothing sensational, nothing illegal, nothing that relied on anything but what Maren lawfully possessed and what was publicly available. A cover page with neutral labels, an index, a timeline. I included Maren's screenshots of the evaluator conversation images. Only what showed coordination language, not private device access, just the images she had saved. I included the subpoena header photo Maren had seen. Again, just the header and date, not claiming it proved guilt, only that a deadline existed. I included the public filings and the charity sponsor list showing repeated LLC names. I included my contemporaneous notes about the restaurant, time, venue, Vale's presence, my ex's statements, her attempt to label Maren unstable, her instruction about what to say tomorrow, and her threat about helped me move it. I printed everything twice, one set for counsel, one set for court intake. Then, at 2:17 a.m., my phone buzzed. A message from my ex. Not urgent now, not demanding. Sweet. "Deacon, please, we can fix this. Call me." I stared at it and felt a dark amusement press against my ribs. Hours ago, she was commanding me. Now she was pleading. That wasn't love, that was strategy. Someone had told her the room saw too much. Someone had told her Maren wasn't folding. Someone had told her tomorrow wasn't a normal day. I didn't reply. At 5:46 a.m., Maren texted me a screenshot, a social media story my ex had posted overnight, a black screen with white text. Protecting myself today. Some people can't let go. No names, no details. Just the kind of vague victimhood that invites speculation and points fingers without leaving fingerprints. Maren's follow-up message was one line. She's starting the narrative. I replied with one line. Let her. We file first. At 7:30 a.m., I picked Maren up. She looked exhausted, but different. Not brave in a heroic way. Brave in the way a person looks when they've decided fear will no longer be their permanent posture. She wore a simple coat and carried her notebook like it was a life vest. We drove toward the courthouse, and the city felt colder, sharper. Morning light on wet streets, people rushing with coffee cups, and no idea how close someone else's life can be to collapse. In the car, Maren spoke quietly, staring straight ahead. She's going to meet me there, she whispered. She said if I walk into that building, she'll never forgive me. I kept my hand steady on the wheel. She doesn't forgive, I said. She trades. Maren's throat tightened. What if the evaluator report can't be reopened, she asked. It can, I said, because what we're presenting isn't emotion, it's process integrity. Maren nodded, then her phone buzzed again. She glanced down, and I saw her face change. What is it? I asked. She swallowed. She says she's already there, Maren whispered. She says she's waiting. I looked at the courthouse ahead. Gray stone, wide steps, people filing in like ants into a system that doesn't care who they are. And I felt the truth settle in my stomach like a weight. Because if my ex was already there, it meant she wasn't coming to talk. She was coming to stop Maren from turning her private threat into a public record, and that meant the first fight of the day wouldn't be in a courtroom. It would be on the courthouse steps, in full view of everyone who mattered. The courthouse steps were slick with last night's rain, the stone darkened in patches like bruises. People climbed them with folders tucked under arms, coats pulled tight, faces neutral in that city way where everyone pretends they're not afraid. I parked half a block away so we'd approach on foot, not boxed in by a car. Public space is protection. Private corners are where my ex did her best work. Maren walked beside me, shoulders stiff, breathing shallow. Her eyes kept jumping to the faces ahead, like she expected to spot her sister behind every scarf and briefcase. You don't have to look for her, I said quietly. If she's here, she'll make herself seen. Maren swallowed. That's what scares me, she whispered. We reached the bottom step and paused for a heartbeat, letting the scene settle. Security line inside the doors, a clerk's window on the first floor, fluorescent light, metal detectors, systems, structures, the opposite of family chaos. Then my ex appeared exactly where I expected her to, not inside, not past security, but on the steps, in the gray light where she could intercept us before anything became stamped. She stood near the railing like she was waiting for a friend, dressed in a clean coat and a calm smile that didn't match the exhaustion in her eyes. She wasn't alone. Two people hovered nearby, a woman in a blazer holding a tablet and a man with the posture of security but no uniform. My ex had brought witnesses, or guards, or props. Hard to tell with people like her. Maren, my ex called, voice warm, almost relieved. Thank God. I've been calling you all night. Maren stopped walking. Her whole body tightened like a wire pulled taut. I could feel her temptation to apologize, to explain, to fold. That's what my ex was counting on. The old script, guilt, then obedience. Instead, Maren did something small and powerful. She didn't answer immediately. She opened her notebook, wrote the time, and wrote courthouse steps. Intercepted. My ex saw the notebook, and her smile faltered. Are you serious? She said, laugh brittle. You're doing that now, like I'm some criminal? Maren's voice came out thin but steady. I'm writing what happens, she said. My ex's eyes flashed. Then she turned her gaze to me, and her smile sharpened into blame. Of course, she said. You taught her that. I didn't teach her, I said calmly. She learned it from you. The woman with the tablet glanced between us, trying to read the temperature. My ex waved her off with a small hand gesture, like shooing a fly. Then she stepped closer to Maren, softening her face, lowering her voice. Please, she said, and the words sounded sincere enough to make even me blink for a second. Maren, don't do this. Not today. Today, Maren repeated, and the way she said it carried weight. You said tomorrow is too late. My ex's mouth tightened. The line had turned into a mirror, and she didn't like the reflection. Maren, my ex whispered, you don't understand what you're stepping into. These people, they don't care about you. They'll chew you up, they'll make you a witness, and then they'll leave you alone with the fallout. I'm your sister. I'm the one who will still be here. That was her real weapon, fear of abandonment. Make Maren believe truth equals loneliness. Maren's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't back up. You were here, she whispered, voice cracking, when you needed me to lie. My ex's face hardened instantly. I needed you to be smart, she snapped. The man beside her shifted his weight, watching, ready to step in if voices rose. My ex wasn't here to plead in private. She was here to apply pressure without looking like pressure. The presence of the tablet woman, the quiet man, the courthouse crowd. She wanted to create the illusion that she was reasonable and we were erratic. Maren took a slow breath, wiped her cheek with her sleeve, and asked the only question that mattered now. Why did you threaten me? She said. My ex's laugh was sharp, defensive. Threaten you? She repeated loudly enough that a couple of passers-by glanced over. Maren, listen to yourself. Then she turned her head slightly, as if addressing the crowd. She's been unwell, she said, voice sweet. She's been spiraling since the divorce. Spiraling again. Unwell. She was building the narrative in real time, trying to seed it into strangers' minds before any clerk could stamp anything. I didn't respond with outrage. I responded with process. I pulled out my own folder, held it at my side, and spoke calmly. We're here to file a motion regarding report integrity, I said, voice steady. If you have concerns, you can address them inside with counsel present. My ex's eyes narrowed. You're filing, she said, and for the first time her calm cracked into genuine panic. Deacon, that's insane. It's lawful, I said, and it's necessary. My ex stepped closer, too close now, voice low. You don't want this, she hissed. You have no idea what you're provoking. Maren flinched at the hiss. The old fear surged, but then she straightened, and I watched her become someone new in real time. I do, Maren said, voice trembling but firm. Because you told me what to say tomorrow. My ex's head snapped up. Stop saying that, she snapped. You're making it sound. It is what it is, Maren whispered. The tablet woman finally spoke, cautious. Maybe we should all calm down, she said. My ex turned to her instantly, smile returning, voice sweet. Thank you, she said. I'm trying. He's manipulating her. She pointed at me with a tiny, subtle motion, like a surgeon indicating where to cut. He's been obsessed with revenge since the divorce, she said, and the lie came out smooth, practiced, the kind of line designed to stick. Maren's mouth opened, and I could see the instinct to defend me. I shook my head slightly. Not now. Defending invites debate. Debate invites storytelling. We didn't need to win hearts on the steps. We needed to get inside the building. Come on, I said gently to Maren. We file. Maren took one step forward. My ex moved with her, blocking her path, smile still on, but her eyes furious. Maren, she said softly, if you walk in there, you're choosing him over me. Maren froze. The ultimatum landed heavy. Blood loyalty versus integrity. My ex knew exactly how to phrase it so Maren would feel like the villain for choosing truth. Maren's lips trembled. Then she whispered, I'm choosing me. My ex's face twisted. No, she hissed. You're choosing to destroy your own family. Maren lifted her notebook slightly, pen trembling. You destroyed it, she said. My ex's calm snapped. She reached out and grabbed the notebook, trying to yank it away. Not hard enough to look violent, but hard enough to reassert control. Maren gasped, and the sound was loud in the open air. Heads turned. People stopped climbing the steps. The quiet man beside my ex stepped forward instinctively, then stopped, realizing too late that movement made it look worse. My ex released the notebook quickly, forcing a laugh. Oh my God, she said, voice too bright. She's dropping things. She's shaking. But the crowd had seen the grab. The grab wasn't dramatic, but it was unmistakable. It looked like what it was, someone trying to snatch the record before it became real. Maren clutched the notebook to her chest like it was her heartbeat. Her eyes were wide, terrified, but the fear now had a new ingredient, anger. Don't touch me, she whispered. My ex blinked, stunned, as if she'd never heard those words from her sister. I didn't escalate. I didn't step into a shouting match. I simply turned toward the courthouse doors, nodded to Maren, and started walking. A moving person is harder to trap than a stationary one. Maren followed, step shaky at first, then firmer. My ex hurried alongside her, voice low and urgent now, dropping the performance because the doors were close. "Maren," she hissed, "listen to me. Tomorrow you say the donations were personal. You say you saw it. You say you don't know anything else. If I don't, you'll tell them I helped you move it," Maren finished quietly. My ex froze. For a second, she looked like she might deny it. But denial takes time, and time was running out. So she did something worse. She confirmed it with her desperation. "Because you did help," she snapped, and the words flew out before she could stop them. "You were there." Silence hit again, but this time it wasn't polite. It was sharp, immediate, because we were now close enough to the doors that security guards and courthouse staff could hear. A uniformed officer at the entrance turned his head slightly. The tablet woman's eyes widened. The quiet man stiffened. Maren's face went white. "No," she whispered. "No, I didn't." My ex's eyes widened, too, realizing what she'd just said out loud, in front of witnesses, inches from a government building. She tried to correct. She stammered. "You were with me. You saw—" Maren's voice broke, but it held one sentence together like a life raft. "You're lying," she whispered, "and you know it." The officer at the door stepped forward slightly, not intervening yet, but watching, assessing whether this was turning into a disturbance. My ex saw him and forced her smile back on, too late. "We're fine," she said brightly to the officer. "Family misunderstanding." The officer didn't smile. He looked at Maren's shaking hands and the notebook clutched to her chest, then back at my ex. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "if you're entering, enter. If not, step aside." My ex hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything. She didn't want to go inside. She wanted to keep this on the steps, in the gray zone where nothing gets stamped. Maren took that moment and moved past her, walking through the doors toward security, tears streaming now, but her posture straight. I followed right behind her, folder in hand, heart steady. My ex called after us, voice breaking into a hissed scream she couldn't fully contain. "You'll regret this." Maren didn't turn around. She walked through the metal detector like she was crossing a border. Inside the courthouse, the air smelled like disinfectant and paper. The fluorescent lights were harsh, unflattering, honest. Maren wiped her face quickly, ashamed of the tears, but not of the choice. She looked at me, breath trembling. "She said I helped," Maren whispered. She said it out loud. I nodded once. "And a uniform heard it," I said softly. "That's not your burden. That's her mistake." Maren's eyes widened, realizing what that meant. My ex had just tried to frame her in the worst possible place to attempt it. We walked toward the filing window, the clerk behind glass already stamping forms with bored precision. The sound of the stamp echoed faintly in the hall like a metronome. Thump, thump, thump. Maren clutched her notebook. Her voice came out quiet. "What if she follows us inside?" she asked. I looked back toward the doors, where my ex hovered just outside the security line, face tight, smile gone, torn between chasing us and saving her performance. "If she comes in," I said, "then she steps into the record she's been trying to avoid." And as we reached the clerk's window, I slid the motion packet forward under the glass, and the clerk lifted the top page, eyes scanning the header like it was just another file in another day. Maren held her breath, because the next sound, the stamp, would turn our fear into something my ex could no longer snatch away. The clerk didn't look up at us the way people look up in movies when something important arrives. She looked at the packet the way clerks look at everything, as an object that needs a number, a date, and a place to live in the system. That was the magic. Courts don't run on emotion, they run on procedure. My ex could manipulate people. She couldn't manipulate stamps. The clerk slid the first page back slightly, scanning the title, then lifted her stamp without expression. The rubber block hovered for a fraction of a second, and in that pause I felt Maren's whole body tense beside me like the world was holding its breath. Thump. The stamp landed with a firm, dull sound, ink spreading in a rectangle that read, "Received," with the date and time printed beneath it. The clerk wrote a file number in the corner, then repeated the motion on the next page. Thump. Maren exhaled shakily, her eyes widening as if she just watched a wall become real. "That's it?" she whispered. "That's the first lock," I said quietly. "Now it exists outside her." The clerk slid a stamped copy back under the glass. "You'll get notice of next steps," she said flatly, already turning to the next person in line. We stepped away from the window and moved toward a bench in the corridor where the fluorescent lights hummed overhead like indifferent insects. Maren sat down hard, clutching her notebook, hands trembling. I feel like I'm going to throw up, she whispered. That's your body exiting a pattern, I said. Breathe. Maren pressed her palm to her mouth, tears threatening again. She grabbed my notebook, she whispered. She said out loud that I helped her. Her voice broke. She's going to ruin me. I didn't say she can't, because she could try. Instead, I said what mattered. She just tried to create a narrative in front of witnesses, I said. And she did it poorly. Maren stared at me. Poorly? She whispered, like the word didn't fit her sister. Yes, I said. She panicked. She contradicted herself. She tried to snatch documentation on courthouse steps. That's not power. That's desperation. Maren's breathing slowed slightly, as if the idea of her sister being desperate rather than omnipotent gave her a place to stand. My phone buzzed. The email from Alan Briggs, the evaluator office assistant, finally arrived. No embellishment. Just an official-looking note attached to a case number requesting contact from counsel regarding NSARB, administrative review of evaluation integrity, and unauthorized access anomalies. The language was dry enough to be real, dry enough to matter. I forwarded it to my attorney with one line. Received today. Custody evaluation integrity review. See attached. Then I showed Maren the subject line and the timestamp, not the content. This is moving, I said. It's not just us. Maren's eyes filled again. So she really did it, she whispered. She did something, I said. And now her systems are waking up. Maren's phone buzzed and she flinched. She looked at the screen and went pale. She's inside, she whispered. I followed her gaze down the corridor. My ex stood near the security line now, just past the metal detectors. Coat still perfect. Face strained. She'd decided to step into the building, which meant she'd decided her performance outside no longer mattered as much as stopping whatever we'd just filed. She walked toward us with controlled steps, but her eyes were wild beneath the makeup. The tablet woman and the quiet man were gone. Either she'd dismissed them or they'd refused to follow her into the fluorescent truth of a courthouse. She stopped a few feet away, close enough for intimacy, far enough to avoid looking aggressive. She forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You filed, she said softly, like she was confirming a rumor. Maren didn't answer. She clutched her notebook tighter. My ex's eyes flicked to the notebook and hardened. You're really doing this, she whispered. Maren's voice came out hoarse. You threatened me, she said. My ex laughed quietly, bitter. You keep saying that like it's a magic word, she hissed. Then she turned to me, smile gone. What do you want, Deacon? The question was almost funny. She didn't understand systems. She understood games. In her head, there was always a want, always a trade, always a lever. I want the record corrected, I said calmly. That's all. My ex's eyes narrowed. Corrected, she repeated. By humiliating me on courthouse steps and dragging my sister into your revenge fantasy? Maren flinched at the word revenge, because that was the label my ex used to make truth sound petty. I kept my voice even. You dragged her, I said. You told her what to say tomorrow. My ex's jaw tightened. She leaned toward Maren, voice lower now. Tomorrow, she whispered, you are going to sit down and you are going to tell them you don't know anything about offshore accounts, and you are going to tell them you never saw anything. Do you hear me? There it was, the script, spoken inside a courthouse where every camera and guard and clerk existed to be a witness. Maren's eyes widened, her lips trembled, but she didn't fold. Stop telling me what to say, she whispered. My ex's face twisted. You're acting like a child, she snapped, then forced softness again. Maren, please, you don't understand. If you speak wrong, you don't just hurt me. You hurt everyone. Everyone, Maren repeated, and the word sounded hollow now. Or just you? My ex's eyes flashed, anger surfacing. You're selfish, she hissed. You're always selfish when you get emotional. Maren's shoulders shook. Tears spilled, but her voice grew steadier. You called me emotional in your restaurant, she said. You told people I was unwell. My ex laughed sharply. Because you were, she snapped. Look at you. Maren went still. Then, very quietly, she opened her notebook and wrote again. My ex's words. Time, place, courthouse corridor. The pen scratched softly, and the sound was louder than my ex's insults because it was permanent. My ex's gaze locked on the moving pen, and I watched something primal rise in her. The urge to grab, to control, to snatch the record away. But we weren't on the steps anymore. We were inside, under cameras, under guards, under a system that didn't care who she thought she was. My ex swallowed hard and forced her hands to stay at her sides. Maren, she said, voice suddenly smooth. You need to come with me. We can fix this. We'll talk to the right people. We'll make this go away. Maren shook her head. No private talk, she whispered. My ex's eyes widened. Are you kidding me? She hissed. You're repeating his lines like he's your... She cut herself off when a guard down the hall glanced over. Too loud, too sharp, wrong building. My ex lowered her voice. Fine, she said. Then talk to me here. Her smile returned, brittle. You want truth? Here's truth. Deacon has been poisoning you against me. He wants you because you're useful. He wants you to burn your own blood for his story. Maren looked at her sister with wet eyes and whispered, You think everything is a story. My ex flinched, and that flinch was pure truth. She did think everything was a story. That was how she survived. That was how she controlled. Narrative first, reality later. I stood up from the bench, folder in hand. We're done talking, I said calmly. Anything else goes through counsel. My ex's face tightened. Counsel, she spat softly. You always hide behind paper. Paper is what you fear? I replied. Maren stood too, legs shaky but upright. My ex turned to her, voice softening into something almost pleading. Maren, she whispered, I'm your sister. Maren blinked hard, tears rolling. Then stop using that, she whispered. Stop using blood like a leash. My ex's eyes filled with something like rage and grief tangled together. For a second, she looked like she might break, like the mask might shatter and something human might spill out. But then the old reflex returned. Control, blame, defense. She leaned in close to Maren and whispered, If you go through with this, you'll lose everything. Your job, your friends, your future. They'll see you as a snitch. Maren's lips trembled. Then she whispered back, I'd rather be a snitch than your accomplice. My ex recoiled slightly as if she'd been slapped. The corridor felt colder suddenly. A few people walked past, glancing at us, and then away, pretending they weren't collecting the scene. The guard at the end of the hall shifted his stance, watching. My ex looked around and realized she had no stage here, no music, no donors, no microphone she could charm, just fluorescent light and the quiet hum of a system that documents everything. She stepped back, smoothing her coat as if smoothing could erase reality. Fine, she said, voice clipped. You want war? You'll get it. Then she turned and walked away down the corridor, heels sharp against tile, back straight, head high, as if she were leaving by choice rather than retreating. Maren stood frozen, trembling, watching her go like someone watching a storm move away but knowing it will circle back. She's going to retaliate, Maren whispered. Yes, I said. That's why we move again today. Maren's eyes widened. Again? I nodded and pulled the folder from my coat, showing her the public filings and sponsor list pages I'd printed. Your sister's deadline isn't only custody, I said quietly. It's money, and the charity story is her shield. Maren swallowed. The gala, she whispered. Tonight, I said. She chose a room with cameras and donors because she wants cover. But rooms with cameras work both ways. Maren's breath hitched. Are we going back? She whispered. Not to fight, I said. To position. Maren stared at me, fear and resolve mixing again. What does that mean? It means we show up where the truth can't be called private, I said. We show up with documents that don't lie, and we let her talk into a microphone she can't control. Maren's eyes widened at the idea, and she whispered the question like she already knew the answer. How? I looked down the corridor where my ex had disappeared, then back at Maren. Because people like her always want the last word, I said. And tonight, we're going to make sure her last word has witnesses. By late afternoon, the city had that sharp winter clarity that makes everything look honest even when nothing is. The courthouse had given us a stamped record, but it hadn't given Maren safety. The stamp was a lock, not a shield. A lock means the story exists. A shield means the story can't reach back and cut you. We drove in silence at first, Maren staring out the passenger window like she was watching for her sister's shadow in every reflection. I didn't ask her to calm down. I didn't tell her it would be fine. People who have lived under a controlling person don't believe comfort anyway. They believe structure. They believe next steps. You're sure we should go tonight, Maren said finally, voice quiet. We don't have to go for drama, I said. We go for positioning. Maren swallowed. That sounds like drama. It's the opposite, I said. Drama is losing control. Positioning is controlling what you can without breaking rules. Maren's hands twisted in her lap. She's going to try to corner me, she whispered. Yes, I said. So we remove corners. We stopped at my office first for 2 reasons. 1, I wanted Maren in a building with cameras and reception and staff who would notice if someone tried to intimidate her. 2, I needed to turn our messy day into a clean packet that could survive the next week. I printed a second copy of everything that mattered, then sealed it in a plain envelope labeled with date and time, because even small rituals of documentation help a nervous brain feel grounded. Maren hovered near my desk, watching me work like she was witnessing a strange, calm magic. I don't understand how you're not shaking, she murmured. I am, I said honestly. Just not where you can see. She blinked, surprised, as if she'd assumed calm was something you either had or didn't. I slid the envelope into a drawer and locked it. Then I took out my phone and called my attorney. I didn't describe feelings. I described events. Threats made on courthouse steps, I said. Attempted seizure of notes. Scripted instruction to give false statements. Witnesses present. We filed motion this morning. I'll forward supplemental notes tonight. My attorney didn't react emotionally either. He just asked for timestamps. The language of safety is boring. When I hung up, Maren's phone buzzed again. She flinched, then looked down at the screen and went pale. She's at my building, Maren whispered. My stomach tightened. How do you know? Maren showed me a message from a neighbor. Your sister is downstairs asking for you. I said you weren't home. She's waiting. My ex wasn't trying to talk. She was trying to make Maren feel hunted, make her feel like she couldn't go anywhere without being intercepted. It was psychological fencing. Tighten the perimeter until the prey comes back to the cage voluntarily. We're not going there, I said. Maren's breath caught. But my apartment, my things. Not today, I said. Today we don't go to private spaces she can control. Maren's eyes were wet again, anger and fear colliding. So where do I go? She whispered. To a place with witnesses, I said. We checked her into a hotel near the courthouse. Not glamorous, not a spectacle, just a clean lobby and a key card and a front desk that would remember faces. Maren looked ashamed at first, like she'd failed because she couldn't go home, but shame is one of my ex's favorite tools. I wasn't letting it sit on Maren's shoulders. This isn't running, I told her as we stood in the lobby. This is relocating the chessboard. Maren nodded slowly. She'll come here too, she whispered. She can, I said, and she can do it under cameras. Maren exhaled shakily, then straightened. Okay, she whispered, as if she were learning the word like a new muscle. By 7, we were back in my car heading toward the gala venue. The event wasn't at Vale's restaurant tonight. The restaurant was the opening night lure. The gala itself was at a ballroom attached to a museum downtown, a place where donors like to feel cultured while they donate. Marble floors, high ceilings, warm lighting that makes everyone look a little better than they are. The kind of room where people applaud speeches and assume kindness equals cleanliness. Maren kept staring at her phone as if it might bite. She's texting, she whispered. Don't read it while we drive, I said. Maren swallowed and turned the phone face down. 2 minutes later, it buzzed again. She didn't turn it over. That alone was progress. We parked in a public garage a block away so we'd enter on foot, again avoiding the trap of being boxed in by a car. The sidewalk was crowded with couples in coats and dresses, people moving toward the museum doors like moths toward warm light. Maren walked close to me, but not touching, her eyes scanning for her sister the way you scan for an oncoming car when you're crossing a dark street. At the entrance, a staff member checked Maren's name, then handed her a lanyard. Guest, it read in clean black letters. I was listed as her +1, which was important. Not romantic, not secret, official, documented. Inside, music floated softly through the air, string quartet warmth meant to make money feel moral. The ballroom beyond the lobby glowed with chandelier light. People stood in clusters, holding champagne, smiling too easily, speaking in that half-laugh tone that makes every sentence sound like it belongs in a press release. Maren's shoulders tightened. I hate this, she whispered. I know, I said, but this room is useful. We didn't go straight into the center. We stayed near the edge, close to exits, close to staff, close to walls. Positioning. Maren's gaze kept snapping toward the doors, and then she stiffened. She's here, she whispered. My ex entered like she owned the air. Black dress again, hair perfect, smile bright. She moved with the confidence of someone who believes rooms are hers to command. Beside her, Graham Vale walked with the careful posture of a man trying to look calm while his internal risk alarms screamed. He leaned slightly toward her as they spoke, not affectionate, more like a handler trying to keep a volatile asset from detonating before the speech. My ex's eyes swept the room, and when they landed on Maren, her smile sharpened instantly. She broke away from Vale without even pretending to hesitate, heading straight for her sister like a missile with lipstick. Maren froze. Her hand shook slightly at her side, and for a second I felt the old pattern surge. Maren shrinking, apologizing, being pulled back into the family role of soft one. "Remember," I murmured, barely moving my lips. "No private, no explaining, one neutral question." Maren swallowed hard and nodded once. My ex reached us with a smile so bright it looked painful. "There you are," she said, voice warm enough for strangers. She kissed Maren's cheek like they were best friends, then she turned to me, smile thinner. "And you?" she added, like I was a stain she couldn't scrub out. Maren didn't flinch. "Hi," she said quietly. My ex's hand slid onto Maren's forearm, gentle pressure disguised as affection. "Come," she whispered, still smiling. "Let's talk." "Here's fine," Maren said, and her voice shook, but she said it. My ex's smile faltered. "Maren," she murmured through her teeth, "don't do this again." Maren's eyes glistened. She looked like she might fold. Then she inhaled slowly and asked softly, "What did you want me to say tomorrow?" My ex froze for half a second, then laughed lightly. "Not now," she said. "Not here." "Yes," Maren whispered. "Here." My ex's eyes flashed. She tightened her grip on Maren's forearm slightly, then immediately loosened it when she realized a server walking by had glanced at them. My ex didn't like being seen touching the leash. Vale approached quickly, smile on, voice polished. "Ladies," he said warmly, stepping between the tension like a velvet curtain. "We're about to begin the program. Maren, I'm glad you made it. We're all one family tonight." Family. Again. The word used to blur boundaries and create obedience. Maren's voice was quiet but firm. "Family doesn't threaten," she said. Vale's smile twitched. My ex's face tightened. "Threaten?" My ex repeated, too loud, then caught herself. She turned toward Vale with a laugh. "She's being dramatic again. Stress, you know." Maren's jaw trembled. She didn't argue the label. She wrote it down in her notebook without pulling it fully out. Just a quick scribble inside her purse. Pen moving, time marking. My ex saw the motion anyway. Her gaze snapped down, and I felt her anger flare. "Are you taking notes?" she hissed. Maren lifted her chin. "Yes," she whispered. My ex leaned closer, smile still on for Vale, voice low for blood only. "You think that protects you?" she whispered. "It doesn't. It makes you look crazy." Maren's eyes filled, but her voice stayed steady. "It makes me look honest," she said. My ex recoiled slightly, as if honesty were an insult. Vale cleared his throat. "Let's not," he said quickly, eyes flicking toward nearby guests who were beginning to notice the tension. "We're here to support the foundation." My ex's smile returned, but it was brittle now. "Of course," she said, and then she looked at Maren with a warning hidden behind her teeth. "After the program," she murmured, "we will talk." Maren didn't answer. My ex turned on her heel and walked back toward the front of the room where the stage was set. A podium, a microphone, a large projector screen behind it with the charity's logo rotating in slow, serene loops. Staff moved around the edges, whispering into headsets. Cameras were set up discreetly, official charity photographers, maybe a local news videographer. Enough recording devices to make a lie feel risky. Maren's breathing came in shallow pulls. "She's going to do something," she whispered. "Yes," I said. "That's why we're here." We moved again, closer to a cluster of staff near the AV booth, but not directly beside them. I wanted to see the stage, the microphone, the screen, and my ex all at once. I wanted to watch the moments where people slip. Maren's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then looked up at me, eyes wide. "She says she'll tell them I stole documents," she whispered. "She can say anything," I replied. "What matters is what you actually did, and what you can show you did." Maren swallowed. "I don't know how to prove what I didn't do," she said. "You don't," I said calmly. "You prove what you did do. You stayed public, you refused private talks, you documented threats, you filed lawful motions, you didn't access anything illegally. That's what survives." Maren nodded slowly, trying to hold on to the logic like a railing. Then I saw it. My ex slipping away from the front cluster and angling toward the AV booth with the casual confidence of someone who believes staff are invisible. She leaned toward a technician, smiling, touching his arm lightly, saying something I couldn't hear. Vale followed, face tight, speaking low. The technician nodded, glanced at the laptop connected to the projector, then at the stage, then back at my ex. Maren saw it too. "What is she doing?" she whispered. "Trying to control the screen," I said. Maren's eyes widened. "Can she?" "She can try," I said. "Trying is enough." A staff member tapped the microphone on stage, and the speakers gave a brief hiss that made the room turn its head. The house lights dimmed slightly. Conversation softened. People drifted toward their seats. Vale stepped onto the stage with a practiced smile, hands lifted like a conductor about to bring an orchestra to life. The projector behind him glowed brighter, the charity logo sharp against white light. For a moment, the room looked exactly like it was supposed to: wealthy generosity, elegant speeches, moral theater. My ex remained near the AV booth, leaning in close to the technician, whispering urgently now. Her smile was gone. Whatever she was saying wasn't sweet. It was sharp, directive, controlling. Maren's voice shook. "She's trying to stop something," she whispered. Vale began speaking into the microphone, warm and confident. "Good evening," he said, and his voice echoed through the ballroom, smooth as polished marble. "Tonight, we celebrate impact." Behind him, the projector's glow pulsed slightly, as if the computer had switched windows. The technician hesitated, hands hovering over the keyboard. My ex's hand touched his wrist, guiding, insisting. He flinched, glanced toward Vale on stage, then back at the screen. Maren's breath caught. "Deacon," she whispered, gripping her purse strap so hard her knuckles went white. Vale continued, "And we honor those who make this possible." The projector brightened again. The logo flickered once more, then steadied. But the flicker was enough to make me feel the hair rise on my arms. Something was cued. Something was being prepared. My ex's eyes lifted from the technician and swept the room again, hunting for Maren, for me, for any sign that we were about to do what she feared. When her gaze landed on us near the AV booth, her face tightened with pure hatred, and she mouthed two words without sound. "Stop. Now." I didn't move. On stage, Vale's smile wavered slightly as he reached the part of his speech where the program would transition to visuals. Photos of beneficiaries, donor names, impact numbers. He turned his head toward the screen behind him, expecting the usual slideshow to begin. The technician's finger hovered over the enter key. My ex leaned in, whispering into his ear like a poisoned prayer. Maren's breathing turned ragged, and she whispered, barely audible, "What if she gets to it first?" I watched the screen glow, watched the cursor blink on the laptop at the booth, watched Vale's hand lift slightly toward the projector like a man about to unveil something that would define the night. And in that split second, before the first image appeared, I realized the truth. Tonight wasn't just about whether the room would hear a confession. It was about who would control what the room saw. The projector stayed on the charity logo for one more heartbeat, bright and serene, like innocence on a loop. Vale stood at the podium with his hands open, smiling into a crowd trained to applaud at the right moments. The technician at the AV booth stared at the laptop screen, and my ex hovered beside him, close enough to breathe on the keyboard. Her mouth moved quickly in his ear, her tone sharp, urgent, controlled. She wasn't asking, she was directing. Maren stood so still beside me I could feel her shaking through the air. Her eyes were fixed on the screen as if it might suddenly turn into a verdict. Her fingers were curled around the strap of her purse like she was holding herself upright. "What do we do?" she whispered, and her voice barely existed. "We don't touch anything," I murmured back. "We don't interfere. We just watch." That sounded passive, but it wasn't. It was the most aggressive, lawful stance you can take against someone who lives by manipulating reactions. If we touched the AV, she'd scream sabotage. If we confronted the technician, she'd cry harassment. If we rushed the stage, she'd call security and become the victim. The only way to win in a room full of cameras is to let the opponent hang themselves with their own need for control. Vale turned slightly toward the screen and smiled wider. "Now," he said warmly into the microphone, "we'd like to share a brief visual presentation of the Foundation's impact." Applause rose obediently. Chairs squeaked. People lifted phones casually the way they do when they expect something pretty. The room was ready for a slideshow. It wasn't ready for reality. The technician's finger hovered over the enter key. My ex's hand rested on his wrist. Too familiar, too insistent. He swallowed, glanced toward Vale, then back at the laptop like he was choosing between his job and a woman's panic. Then Vale nodded, a subtle cue. The technician pressed enter. The screen went white for a split second. Then the charity logo shrank to the corner as a slide deck loaded. A photo appeared. Children smiling, a clinic opening, donors clapping. Exactly what everyone expected. The room relaxed instantly, like it could exhale because the night was staying inside its comfortable story. My ex's shoulders eased. She leaned closer to the technician and murmured something that made him nod. She wanted control over the sequence. She wanted to know what came next. She wanted to prevent surprises. Maren's eyes flicked to me, panicked. "It's normal," she whispered. "She fixed it." "No," I said softly. "She delayed it." Maren blinked. "What?" I pointed with the smallest movement of my chin. The technician was sweating. Vale's smile looked strained now, as if he'd noticed the tension at the booth, but couldn't stop the program without looking odd. And my ex kept leaning in, whispering, because she couldn't tolerate the idea that something might slip out of her hands. The slideshow advanced. Another photo, another applause cue, another soft laugh from the donors. Vale spoke over it, warm voice matching warm images. The room was fully anesthetized by virtue. Then the projector flickered again. A tiny glitch, barely noticeable, but enough to snap my attention. The screen stuttered for a fraction of a second, and in that stutter I caught the wrong thing. A file name flashing briefly at the bottom of the screen before the next slide loaded. Not a charity file name, not an Impact 2026 type of file. It was a boring, ugly file name, the kind that belongs to a spreadsheet or an audit. Something that didn't fit the story. Maren didn't see it. My ex did. Her head snapped up, eyes narrowing at the screen like she'd just seen a crack in her armor. She turned on the technician, whispering sharply now. No smile, no sweetness. The technician shook his head slightly, confused. My ex's hand tightened on his wrist again, not gentle anymore. He flinched. And that flinch, under stage lighting, in front of a room of donors, was the beginning of the end. Vale continued speaking, but his voice wavered slightly as he sensed something wrong. He looked toward the booth, smile tightening, and tried to keep the program moving without exposing the tension. "As you can see," he said, "every contribution becomes a real, measurable change." The technician reached for the trackpad to adjust something. My ex slapped his hand away, fast, not hard, not violent, but sharp enough to be undeniable. A few heads turned. A donor near the front row frowned. A woman on the side lifted her phone slightly, lens angled toward the booth now rather than the stage. People weren't watching the kids on the screen anymore. They were watching the adults near the controls. My ex realized too late she'd moved too fast. She forced a smile, leaned in as if laughing at a joke, and patted the technician's arm like everything was friendly. But it was over. The room had seen her need. Maren's breath caught. "She touched him," she whispered. "She can't help it," I murmured. "Control is her reflex?" The technician, now visibly rattled, tried to fix whatever was glitching. He clicked the presentation window, then clicked again, his hands suddenly clumsy. My ex whispered harsher. The technician's face flushed. He hit the wrong key. The screen behind Vale flickered, the charity slide vanished, and for one raw second the audience saw the computer desktop projected 10 feet tall on a museum ballroom wall, a Windows folder, a list of files. And in that list, visible to hundreds of donors, were names that did not belong to charity. LLC, transfer map, donor route, grant reconcile, evaluator chat images, and a spreadsheet with a date and the word ledger. The room froze. It wasn't loud. It was that same polite silence, but multiplied. People stopped breathing. Phones lifted higher without shame now. A man near the center row muttered, "What is that?" like he'd stepped into the wrong movie. Vale turned mid-sentence, eyes widening as he saw his clean story ripped open by a desktop full of ugly file names. For a second he stared like the podium had betrayed him, then his gaze snapped to the booth. My ex went pale. She lunged for the keyboard with a frantic smile still plastered on her face, as if she could physically push the truth back into the laptop. "Sorry," she called out brightly, voice too loud. "Technical glitch." But her body language was wrong. Too urgent, too panicked, too familiar with what she was trying to hide. The technician tried to fix it, hands shaking. He clicked back into the slideshow, but the cursor dragged across the wrong window. The folder stayed up. Vale's microphone squealed faintly as he took a sharp breath. "One moment," he said, voice strained. My ex hissed at the technician, and then, because she couldn't tolerate waiting, she grabbed the microphone cable running to the booth and yanked it slightly, as if pulling cables could pull truth away. The sound system popped loudly. The room flinched, and in that flinch, Vale stepped away from the podium with a sudden, instinctive move, like a man trying to distance himself from whatever was about to explode. Maren's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered, eyes wide, tears gathering again. The technician finally got the slideshow back on, but it was too late. The room had seen the folder. The room had seen file names that implied audits, routes, ledgers, evaluator chats. The room didn't need details. They needed only the scent of fraud. Wealthy donors have one instinct sharper than compassion: self-preservation. Vale returned to the microphone, voice forced. "Apologies," he said, smile stiff. "An internal file opened accidentally?" Internal. He wanted it to sound small, contained, harmless. But my ex couldn't stop. She stepped closer to Vale now, whispering urgently at the side of the stage like a frantic stage manager. "Tell them it's nothing," she hissed. "Tell them it's deacons. Tell them it's—" Vale jerked his head slightly, trying to shake her off without looking like he was shaking her off. He leaned into the microphone and said, "We will continue," but his voice sounded cracked. Then my ex did the one thing she always did when she felt the room slipping away. She tried to seize the narrative with her own voice. She reached for the microphone. Vale turned, too late. The technician's eyes widened. A staff member near the stage took one step forward, then hesitated, unsure whether to intervene in front of donors. My ex grabbed the microphone with both hands like it was a lifeline. "Everyone," she said brightly, voice booming through the ballroom. "I'm so sorry for that confusion. There are people who can't let go of the past, and they try to ruin good work with personal vendettas." The donors went still again. Phones rose even higher. A few people exchanged glances. Personal vendettas. She was pointing without naming. She was laying blame without evidence. She was doing exactly what she'd always done, turning truth into drama and drama into dismissal. Maren's breath came in quick sobs. "She's blaming you," she whispered. "Let her," I murmured. "It makes her talk." My ex continued, voice too confident now, like she was auditioning for victimhood. "This foundation is clean," she declared. "Any files you saw were misrepresented. And my sister?" She laughed lightly, cruelly. "My sister is being manipulated into thinking she's part of something she doesn't understand." Maren stiffened beside me, tears sliding down her cheeks. Her fingers curled around her notebook, and I could feel her wanting to scream, wanting to defend herself, wanting to collapse. Instead, she did the most devastating thing possible in that room. She stepped forward one pace, just enough to be visible in the aisle, and raised her voice, not screaming, just clear. "She told me what to say before a grand jury subpoena tomorrow," Maren said. The sentence sliced through the ballroom like a knife through silk. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't emotional, it was specific. My ex froze mid-breath. The microphone hovered near her lips. Her eyes widened in genuine terror because now the room had a word that donors understand. Grand jury. Vale's face went white. A murmur spread. Not whispers now. Actual murmurs. People turned toward Maren. Then toward my ex. Then toward Vale. Then toward the phones recording everything. My ex's mouth opened, then snapped shut. Her eyes darted left and right as if searching for an exit in the air. Vale grabbed for the microphone instinctively. "Maren," he said sharply, voice no longer warm. "This is inappropriate." But my ex couldn't stop herself. She turned on Maren like a cornered animal and hissed into the microphone, "You don't even know what you're talking about." And there it was. Not denial, not calm, not leadership. Rage. Maren's voice shook, but she held it. "You threatened to tell them I helped you move it," she said. "You texted it." My ex's eyes went wild, and she shouted without thinking, "Because you were there." The words flew out and echoed through the ballroom, amplified and immortal. Because microphones don't care if you regret what you said. They only care that you said it. The room erupted, not with yelling, but with collective movement. People stood, chairs scraped. Donors looked at each other like they'd just realized their names were printed on a program attached to a scandal. Some people rushed toward the exits. Others leaned in closer, hungry for the spectacle. Phones held high like torches. Vale lunged for the microphone, face twisted in horror. "Cut it," he barked toward the booth. The technician scrambled, hands shaking, and the speakers popped, then went silent. But silence didn't erase what had been said. Silence only gave it room to echo in people's minds. My ex stood on stage, chest heaving, eyes darting, realizing too late that she'd just admitted something in front of 200 donors, a local news videographer, and half a dozen staff who would remember every syllable. Maren swayed in the aisle, shaking, tears pouring, but she didn't back down. She opened her notebook and wrote furiously. Time, exact quote, crowd reaction, stage context. Vale stepped forward, trying to regain control like a man patching a sinking ship with his hands. "Everyone," he said, voice strained, "please remain calm. This is a personal dispute." A staff member rushed onto the stage and whispered something in Vale's ear. His face tightened further. Then another staff member appeared near the entrance. speaking urgently to security. Security began moving through the crowd, not toward Maren, not toward me, but toward the stage. Because the words that had been spoken weren't just embarrassing, they were procedural risk. They were the kind of words that can trigger calls, inquiries, damage control, audits. My ex saw security approaching and snapped into pure survival. She stepped back, trying to hand the microphone to Vale like it had burned her. "I didn't mean," she stammered, but she didn't finish because finishing would require choosing a lie, and she didn't know which one was safest anymore. Vale's eyes were cold now. "Get off my stage," he hissed, low enough that only those close could hear, but sharp enough that my ex recoiled. The charity director who had once smiled at her like a partner now looked at her like a bomb. My ex stumbled down the steps, heels clicking, posture still trying to look composed even as her eyes screamed. She pushed through a cluster of guests heading toward the side exit, and as she passed, I heard the whispers begin to build into names. Did she say grand jury? Did she say moved it? Was that the donor route file? People were no longer admiring chandeliers. They were counting distance between themselves and the scandal. Maren's breathing came in sobs, but her shoulders stayed square. She turned slightly toward me, eyes wide. "I didn't mean for that to happen," she whispered. "You didn't make her say it," I replied. Maren wiped her face and looked toward the stage where Vale was speaking with security and staff, trying to contain a room that no longer wanted containment. "What happens now?" Maren whispered. I stared at the side exit where my ex had disappeared, and I felt a cold, clean certainty settle in. "Now," I said quietly, "the story belongs to witnesses." And in a room full of witnesses, my ex's favorite weapon, private pressure, was dead. Because the moment she shouted, "Because you were there," into a microphone, she didn't just try to frame her sister, she proved she was willing to. And that single amplified sentence would follow her into every office she feared tomorrow.